Travelers, welcome to the Formula One Deep Dive. That's Charlie Frank. I'm Chris Evertson. And Charlie, we are in the heat, literally the heat of the European swing of the Formula One season.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. As you just said, we're the three consecutive race weekends. It's something they don't really do in F1. I think it's cool because it challenges the teams and it challenges the crews. And so I think it's really cool. And man, the action on the track has been outstanding.
Oh, well, let's get right to it. I mean, it has been outstanding. We're going to really discuss the Red Bull Ring, the Österreich Ring race that just happened this past Sunday, yesterday, literally. And we're going to talk a little bit about the upcoming race, the Silverstone Grand Prix, a home race for a lot of teams, because a lot of teams are located in that area. And then we'll even talk about some of the other European races that are coming up right after that.
Yeah, no, that's pretty exciting. But let's just get right into it from last weekend. You've been to the Austrian track quite a couple times, right?
Yeah, several times. And I got to tell you, if you've never been to a Formula One race and you want to pick your first race to go to, the Austrian Grand Prix, the Red Bull Ring, is probably one of the best. It's conveniently located near the city of Graz. A little bit further away is Vienna. Very accessible by train and bus. And the track facility is beautiful. There's so many great spots to view the event. And as we saw in this past race, and as we've seen in many seasons over the past several seasons, great battles always ensue at the Red Bull Ring.
Yeah. So recapping last weekend's race, Friday was the sprint. I was actually traveling. I didn't get to see it till Sunday morning. I just bombed through the Friday sprint race qualifying and the final Grand Prix. But Friday was interesting in the sprint. Lando and Max Verstappen have been all over each other. They're rekindling their days in go-karts, and they're just like going at it head to head. And it's the best thing in the world for Formula One, isn't it?
Well, it really is. I mean, the era of dominance, the Red Bull dominance, seems to be coming a little bit to an end. Everything is much more competitive. Not only are the McLarens a lot quicker, right, but Mercedes is kind of coming back. We've seen the Ferraris ebb and flow with some speed. But, again, it was amazing. And, you mentioned qualifying and you mentioned the sprint race, and it's been really tight. I mean, yes, Red Bull Ring is one of the shorter tracks on the calendar, if not the shortest track, lap time wise. But the lap times and the quali times are so tight and the competition is so tight. And part of that in the race, not only, going directly from qualifying to the race with 3 DRS zones on this track, basically consecutive DRS zones, straightaway, turn, straightaway, turn, straightaway. It makes it really, really exciting. And we saw all of that this past Sunday.
Yeah. And you mentioned that things were tight. They were tight from Lando down. The qualifying was tight. Max looked like he was in a class all by himself. During qualifying for sure, but that just goes to show that the Red Bull's fast in qualifying in one lap with Max at the helm, and in the race, not so much. I mean, maybe the McLaren's a little bit better, but what a great race last weekend.
Yeah, it was. And if we talk specifically about the Grand Prix, not necessarily the sprint race, because the sprint race turned a little bit into a parade. Those that were quick were quick. Right. Those that were slow were slow. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. But in the Grand Prix, the start was very, very exciting. There's a lot of battles for position. We saw a little bit of contact that really punished Charles Leclerc, who had a horrible weekend front to back. I mean, just everything about what the Ferraris did this weekend was awful. Carlos Sainz saving grace got a podium as a result of the contretemps between Lando Norris and Max Verstappen that took place over several laps. But the Ferraris were nowhere to be seen. The Aston Martins were nowhere to be seen. But Mercedes, McLaren, and Red Bull, what a great battle.
Yeah, it really was great to see Mercedes kind of finding their form. midway through the season, and they're getting closer and closer. They're really not that far. For those of you who didn't see the race, it ended in pretty spectacular fashion with Lando Norris and Max Verstappen just beating on each other for the win. And George Russell came through to win the race in the Mercedes. So, Mercedes was there. They were fast enough to be close, and they're getting a lot better. But what did you think about that battle between Lando and Max?
It was fierce. It was great to see. I love the action that these two guys are creating out on track. I mean, they're both young. They're both very aggressive. Lando Norris wants the championship. Max Verstappen is in control of the championship this year, and at the moment, points wise. But Lando Norris is right there and in striking distance. So he is going to be on full on attack. So it's not surprising that we saw the kind of action we saw in the Austrian Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was really cool. And, a little bit interesting on the stewards assessing penalties. They gave Lando Norris a 5-second penalty for leaving, for going over track limits. The first two he clearly did on his own while he was trying to catch Max. But I don't know about that. I mean, Max clearly moved over in the braking zone, which you're not allowed to do, to block and going into turn 3. And that caused Lando, that was the second one. I'm sorry. The first one, Lando just dive bombed, went right through, missed the apex and went right off the track. So the first one is on Max. The second one, though, the first one's on Lando. Second one was definitely on Max. But what do you think of those penalties that were assessed?
Lando earned the track limits penalty, but you also have to look at, track limits are there for a reason. I love what the Red Bull Ring has done in bringing the gravel traps right up to the track limits. So thereby, therefore policing the limits by the drivers. There are some spots where you can get a little bit outside track limits and gain an advantage. And obviously Lando took a little bit of advantage of that. I really feel like the penalties are not consistent. My biggest issue is there's a lack of consistency with the penalties. Max should have gotten a penalty, or it should have given the spot back when Lando made that pass. Lando stayed in turn 3, one of the pass attempts, made the pass going into turn 3 and exiting turn 3. Max went outside track limits and held that, then and moved in front of Lando Norris to hold the front position, the P1 spot. And quite frankly, he was off track limits, used out of bounds territory to gain an advantage and maintain first place during the race. And no penalty for that, and no giving the position back. So there's not enough consistency in the penalties. I'm for rules and regulations here. I mean, but all drivers in all situations need to be held accountable for this in the same way, and that's just not happening.
Yeah, and the other thing is they've got a legitimate rivalry now. Max and Lando are banging on each other, and that's what the fans want to see. I mean, no one wants to see the race decided after the checkered flag when the stewards come through and drop a penalty. Or even worse, no one wants to see a 5-second penalty during the race. I agree with you that it's definitely been inconsistent. And there was a BS penalty that they assessed Max for moving over in the braking zone, that what actually ended up causing the demise of both guys. I mean, Max. Yeah, so that was a total BS penalty for Max.
It was a BS penalty, but he wasn't penalized for moving over. That would have been a separate penalty. It was actually, the penalty was for the contact after he moved over. So it was a contact penalty. It wasn't holding his line under braking or making two moves under braking to block Lando Norris. And there was not a penalty for that. And that's where I feel the penalty should have been, because he clearly moved on multiple occasions, left and or right, to block Lando, in turn 3 specifically, repeatedly.
And that was during the heat of the battle. But Yeah, at the end, I think what I'm saying is the BS penalty was they gave him a 10-second penalty. He was 17 seconds ahead of the next car. So it really didn't matter. Oh, I got my assistant talking there in the background. But he was uh, he was 17 seconds ahead. So they gave him a 10-second penalty so they could say they gave him a penalty. That's what I think is BS. And but the penalty was completely
Right.
meaningless. So
It was a meaningless
um,
penalty, unfortunately, but it had zero consequence. And it was only one
yeah,
penalty of two that he should have gotten in that moment. Plus, then the no penalty
yeah.
for going off track to keep P1. So there's just a lack of consistency. But aside from all of that, I love the action we're seeing out on track. I mean, there was some great battles.
Yeah.
Obviously, we know what happened. Lando Norris and Max Verstappen, they both cut down tires. I also, and I'm not certain how people are viewing this, but after that incident on that straightaway, Max moves over what looks like pretty clearly to cut Lando Norris off, not to get off the driving line because he has a flat tire. He's clearly in his mirrors looking, in my opinion, clearly looking in his mirrors to see where Lando is and tries to put him into the dirt there. And nothing was ever mentioned about that. I feel like that was unsafe and very unsportsmanlike conduct in the race.
Oh, for sure. It absolutely was. But let's hope that the stewards don't get too overly involved because right now we're seeing amazing action on the track. And before we move on, Chris, let's just give a little tip of the hat to Oscar Piastri. He made it up to second place, and he was actually gaining on George Russell at the end there. So it wasn't a bad run at all for Oscar. I mean, he lost his fastest qualifying time. And so he had to start seventh. But, and he had some bumps and bruises along the way. But Oscar's looking pretty good going into the British Grand Prix.
Oh, God, he's got to be. I mean, you could see it in his face on the podium. He was so distraught over the fact that he did lose his fast lap qualifying, which pushed him back in the grid for the start of the race. But consistent drive through the whole race and was always right there in the mix. I'm a little surprised he wasn't a little bit closer to George Russell. But maybe, at that point, in the latter stages of the race, he was just kind of solidifying his position. He wasn't like going balls out to chase down George Russell. Of course, when Max and Lando got together, that changed the dynamic of the race a little bit. So we saw some, Lando was closing in on George. But I mean, again, you got to give George credit. He qualified well. He drove a very clean and uneventful race. I mean, as much as a fan as I want to see all that action, all that event stuff out on race, as a driver, you want as boring of a race as possible. And you know what? He held the car, he held it together and outdrove his teammate Lewis Hamilton. Multiple world champion, team leader at Mercedes this year, moving on to Ferrari next year, and he's been outdriving Lewis Hamilton pretty much all year long.
Yeah, and you brought up performance so far this year, and let's do something a little bit different, and let's talk a little bit about the biggest winners and biggest losers so far this season. I'm going to let you start. I've got a clear-cut biggest winner in my mind, but I want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I have to start with this. The biggest winner are the fans of Formula One. We have 5 different winners this season. That has not happened in a long, long time. Both Ferraris have won races. George Russell, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen has got multiple wins. So the fans are really the biggest winners in all of this. Obviously, Formula One's a huge winner because they're just raking in the cash. From a driver's standpoint, I got to tell you, actually, if you want to jump into the drivers and teams aspect, I'll defer to you on that right now.
Yeah, I think you know what? I'm going to go with biggest winners so far this year is McLaren. I mean, Lando is clearly right there with Max now. There's nothing between them in every race. And our buddy Zach Brown over at McLaren has done an incredible job because those McLaren cars are really good in race form. So I have to say, my biggest winner so far this year is McLaren and Lando. Go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. And what's great about that, it's Lando and Piastri. It's Lando Norris and Piastri. They're both doing a great job with a platform that seems to be very, very consistent under a variety of circumstances and situations. High speed, low speed, max speed. The car is really, really stable in just about everything. And they really seem to be the most gentle on the tires, which is, I think, what has allowed Lando Norris to attack Max Verstappen in these races, especially in the latter stages. And the biggest loser has to be the Red Bull pit crew with a 6-second pit stop. Wow. Thank you for that, because that was a gift for every F1 racing fan.
Yeah, and Chris is talking about the 6-second pit stop at the Red Bull Ring last weekend that allowed Lando Norris to catch up to the back of Max Verstappen. But overall, so that's I think we have an agreement on biggest winners of the year. Biggest losers of the year. Well, you know what? I want to add an asterisk as another biggest winner, and that is the Haas team is quietly doing a good job. I mean, they don't have Gunther Steiner, their big charismatic, outlandish team principal anymore, but they are doing a good job. I mean, they're benefiting from a good Ferrari motor for sure, but what a great job Haas is doing.
Yeah, and I love the fact that it's teamwork that's helping them out. I mean, right now Nico Hulkenberg's getting a lot of the credit, and he is a phenomenal driver. He always outdrives what you think that car should be able to do. He outqualifies what I think the car should be able to do. And in this race, as a result of a couple upfront DNFs, he places in 6th place. But I also have to give a nod to Kevin Magnussen. He's getting a lot of grief for driving aggressively and maybe using some tactics that are not only his way of driving, but also team tactics. But Haas is doing a great job to manufacture points and results, particularly benefiting as a driver, Nico Hulkenberg, who next year moves on to the all-German Audi Sauber team, which, I think I agree with you. Yeah. Also, you got to give a nod to Yuki Tsunoda. He's doing a great job with RB2. Yes. He's been outperforming Danny Ricciardo. He's in the points. He's in the top 10 point standings. So you got to give a nod to Yuki Tsunoda as well.
Yeah, and it was, you pointed out earlier, there was a great finish for 6th place between Perez in the Red Bull and Hulkenberg and the Haas, and Crofty and the Formula One team completely missed it. The race was over. They were so far behind. They were about 45 seconds behind the leader, and they cut to the race between those two for 6. But Crofty and the F1 team thought they had already taken the checkered. In fact, they passed each other. I think they both passed each other once more before they even got to the checkered. So bummer they missed that, because that was a highlight moment for Hulkenberg and Haas.
Yeah, definitely a great battle to watch. It's too bad we didn't get to see more of that. I was watching the timing gantry and seeing how the gap would go down to a 100th of a second. They would switch, they'd switch back and switch again. Yeah. It happened very, very quickly. We didn't really get to see that on the screen. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Right. That was another fantastic battle throughout the complete racing peloton. There was battles at the front, battles in the middle. This is great. I mean, last year was, Max Verstappen walks away, and we're looking for a battle to watch in 7th. And now we're seeing it from the front of the pack to the back of the pack, and it's really very, very exciting. But I guess we should really kind of look at, we talk.
We didn't talk about biggest losers yet. I just want to bring up a couple, not to be negative Nelly here, but it's interesting that that Checo Perez, who I love, is just not getting it done right now. And he let a Haas car get the better of him last weekend at Red Bull Ring. I guess Red Bull doesn't care because they signed him. They clearly like the dynamic of having a clear cut number one in Max and having Checo just kind of like run interference in the back. But what do you think about Checo, and what do you think about him staying on for another year at Red Bull?
Well, congratulations to him for getting that extension on his contract. I'm going to agree with you wholeheartedly that he's a very safe second driver, unlike what we might see next year in the Ferrari camp with Leclerc trying to
Right.
find his first championship and Lewis Hamilton coming on with his 7 world championships. How are they going to manage that scenario? We've seen that
Right.
come end in tears for many a team in years gone by. Whether it's Michael Schumacher partnered up with someone, or Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen, Nico Rosberg and Lewis Hamilton in 2016. It was. That's going to be challenging. So, in Perez, congratulations to him. I agree with you. He's an amazing driver. He's not milking the same amount of results and speed out of the Red Bull car as Max Verstappen, but I think it's a very, very safe place for him to be, and it's very safe for Red Bull to keep him on board. But then looking at some of these other teams, I mean, I'm shocked. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, with Checo Perez, just one last thing to add is that he was a lot closer to Max the last few years than he's been this season. And that's troubling for sure. But obviously, they like the dynamic. They don't care if he's fifth, and Max wins the races. But he's not anywhere near close to Max this year. He was challenging Max in some places last year.
Yeah, that's all very, very true. And we don't know what's going on with the car, how they're setting up the car. Are they testing different stuff, trying different stuff with Checo? So we don't know everything. We never will. So who knows? But I agree, Checo is much closer in years gone by. And also there's been some situations where Checo just ends up, with a 5-place grid penalty, putting on the back foot. They seem to like penalizing Checo more than they like penalizing Max. No conspiracy theories being started here. But I would like to see Checo do a little bit more with that car.
Yeah. And I want to add one more biggest loser for me is the Aston Martin team. I mean, they were right near the front last year, and they're going backwards right now.
I mean, it's shocking how bad they really, really are. I mean, they're still scoring points. Some points. Lance Stroll is actually doing a really, really good job with the car. I mean, he's to a degree outperforming Fernando Alonso right now. In the most recent races, he's been outperforming Fernando. And Fernando clearly does not look like the happy driver that we've seen in a car that can do something, and he might be able to do something. He definitely seems much more reserved, more quiet, and I think he's biting his tongue right now. Maybe in hopes of getting a much faster car going in the 2025 season when they get the Honda Power. So it's right. Sad to see how poor they are doing. I was hoping that maybe there would be a 6th winner in this season, but I don't think Aston Martin can do it. And, honestly, you also got to kind of throw Alpine under the bus as well, because, I mean, they're just doing nothing. And the Williams, I mean, it's just so sad to see that great, historic world championship winning team fall so far and make absolutely zero headway. I mean, they have not improved an iota in 6 years.
Yeah. No, I agree. It's sad, but let's move on, pal, to the preview for this weekend, British Grand Prix. What are your thoughts about the British Grand Prix coming up?
Fireworks! Max and Lando are going to go at it. We're going to throw Piastri in the mix, and we also are going to throw the Mercedes into the mix because that is technically their home track, if you will.
Yep.
And it's going to be, I think, a fireworks of a weekend. It's going to be July 4th all over again on next Sunday because it's a fast track. It's a challenging track. There's a lot of turning, mid-range, high-speed turns. There's some tight stuff as well. I really feel that the McLarens are going to push forward even tighter on the Red Bulls, if not take the pole position outright. But do not discount Lewis Hamilton at what is absolutely his home race. So Lando Norris is going to be on fire. Oscar Piastri is he wants to redeem himself. He feels like he should be winning races, and quite frankly, if he had a better qualifying in Austria, he might have won that race. And so I think it's going to be even more exciting than what we saw in what was very exciting at the Red Bull Ring.
Yeah, and we're running up against our 30-minute time limit, but let's talk a little bit about picks. I'm going to go first. Before I say that, I'm going to just talk about some teams I think are going to do well. I think you're exactly right. I think McLaren, they were fast there last year. The car's even better this year. It's going to be nip and tuck for the pole, but in the race pace, I see Lando and Piastri and the McLarens having a little bit better pace, and I see Mercedes being just a little bit behind. Let's see what. Hopefully, Lewis Hamilton can make that change a little bit. Also, just it's Monday, but looking at the weather for this weekend, there might be some rain, so that would actually throw a monkey wrench into the whole thing. So I'd love to see that. But I'm going to go first on picks for this week, and I am going to take Oscar Piastri. I think that you hit the nail on the head. He feels he's due. I think he knows he's blown it a few times, and I think he's going to be all over it. He was good there last year. I think he's going to be great this year.
Yeah, I have a hard time not agreeing with that pick, And what's funny is neither of us said a word about Ferrari. We didn't talk about them as a loser because, but they are kind of losing their mojo or their pace. I would not be surprised if we saw something different out of Ferrari come Silverstone in a few days' time. But if I have to pick a race winner, you know what? I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to really go out on a limb because Max Verstappen, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, those guys are going to be going at it hammer and tong. Charles Leclerc wants something. It's been gone backwards for him. There's going to be a lot of battling. Watch for Lewis Hamilton sleeping in the background and let those other guys take each other out. And I'm going to pick Lewis Hamilton to win his home race.
Oh, that's a great
and get
pick.
us our sixth winner of the season.
Yeah, that's a great pick, and it's interesting on Ferrari. You brought that up. We didn't really talk about Ferrari. I mean, they should be fast at Silverstone, but it's unbelievable to think that at this point in the season, Ferrari is the fourth best team. So really crazy.
Yeah. And, it's hard to imagine, the point standings are pretty interesting with Max Verstappen way out in front with 237 points. Wow. Lando Norris with 156. And then Charles Leclerc is still hanging on in third place with 150. So the battle in the points championship is still up for grabs. I mean, we're still very early in this 24 race season. This European swing is going to be really interesting. And I would not be surprised. The race, I believe, starts at 1:30 p.m. local time, And in the
Right.
middle of that race, it's very likely to see that afternoon thunderstorm roll through, but it's still going to be a very
Right.
hot race. I mean, Europe is in the middle of a massive heat wave, just like the United States is. They're going through a massive heat wave, and they're seeing 40 degrees Celsius, which is about 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's super hot. And what effect is that going to have on the Pirelli tire choices? Because at Red Bull Ring, they chose the softest compounds. And are they going to stay with this soft, sticky compound in the super high heat, or are they going to back it off and go to the C1, C2, C3? Or what tire compound is Pirelli going to bring to the track? And that's going to play into how well the cars will do on track as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, there you have it. There's our preview. If you disagree with us or agree with us, or if you have your own biggest winners and losers, if you have your own race picks, by all means, get in touch with us. You can go right on YouTube and you can check out this podcast or this podcast video cast, I guess you could say. You can find us anywhere you get your download your podcast. We are on Apple. We are on iHeartRadio. We are on Spotify. We're on Instagram at The Speed Traveler on Instagram. So if you've got a comment and you want to join the discussion, by all means, reach out to us. Chris, that was a fun show. I'm really looking forward to this weekend. And you have any closing thoughts?
Max Verstappen.